So picture this. You deploy an actual army to find a single missing 5-year-old boy.
Right, a literal army.
Yeah, I mean, we are talking about 600 specialized officers. You've got thermal drones scanning the terrain from the sky, mounted cavalry sweeping the ground, and highly trained odorology dogs.
It's basically a flawless multi-million-dollar dragnet.
Exactly. It is the absolute pinnacle of a state's emergency response apparatus. But then I want you to imagine that this entire massive operation is completely neutralized, like totally blinded and misdirected.
Absolutely. And by what?
By a single dirty pair of shoes, deliberately placed in the mud by the very man who was leading the search.
It's just staggering.
It really is. So welcome to the deep dive. I want you to take a second and really ground yourself in the present moment with us today, because today is Monday, June 8th, 2026.
Right. And the date is actually super important here.
It is, because in exactly 8 days, on June 16th, one of the most complex, systemic, and honestly heart-wrenching mega trials in the history of the Argentine justice system is going to start.
Yeah, it's a trial that has the entire region, well, really the whole country, just holding its collective breath.
Yeah.
Because the sheer scale of what is about to unfold in that federal courtroom is completely unprecedented. And not just because of the nature of the crime itself, but because of the terrifying mirror it holds up to the institutions that are supposed to protect us.
Right. We are talking about the disappearance of a 5-year-old boy named Loan Danilo Peña. He vanished on June 13th, 2024, in a rural province of Argentina called Corrientes.
And, we should be really clear right out of the gate about what we're doing here today.
Yes, absolutely. The mission of our deep dive today is not to just recount a true crime story.
Yeah.
We are not here to, give you sensational details or play armchair detective.
No, not at all. Today is an autopsy of systemic state failure.
Right.
We are looking at the anatomy of an institutional collapse. We're examining what happens when the safeguards fail, not by accident, but by design.
Exactly. And we are going to be using an incredibly comprehensive technical, chronological, and legal dossier today. And we really have to give credit where it's due here.
Oh, for sure.
We are pulling heavily from the phenomenal analytical work of author Alejandro Cariati Martelloni, his detailed reports, the exhaustive timelines he has built. They've been featured extensively on the YouTube channel at Kinksies.
Yeah, the research is just remarkable.
It really is. It takes thousands of pages of legal filings, forensic reports, and witness testimonies and distills them into a clear picture of how a case that started as a supposed lost child in the woods actually exposed an alleged child abduction ring.
Right, and massive police corruption.
Yeah, massive corruption, political interference, and even the bizarre, almost unbelievable involvement of a fake international NGO. So, okay, let's unpack this.
Let's do it.
Because the stakes here for you as a listener are about understanding how safety networks fail. What happens when the very people who are sworn to guard those networks are the ones compromising them?
That is the crucial thread we need to pull on today. I mean, we often operate under this comforting assumption that the apparatus of the state, the police, the emergency alerts, the justice system, that it all functions as an impenetrable protective shield.
Right. We pay our taxes, we elect officials, and we assume that if the worst happens, the system will catch us.
Exactly. But the Loan Peña case forces us to examine the terrifying reality of what occurs when that shield is deliberately turned into a smokescreen by the people holding it.
Yeah.
We are looking at a masterclass in obstruction. It's a textbook example of how localized corruption can totally dismantle a federal response.
So let's wind the clock back to the very beginning. The date is June 13th, 2024. And the setup is incredibly relatable.
It really is. Just a typical family day.
Right. It's a Thursday. It's a festive family lunch. They're gathering at the rural home of Loan's paternal grandmother, Catalina Peña. She's 87 years old.
And the location here is key.
Yeah, it's a remote area in the municipality of 9 de Julio, specifically a place called El Algarrobal. And we really need to spend some time on this location because the geography itself is weaponized later in the story.
It is entirely central to the whole case. We actually have the exact geographic coordinates from the dossier. It's 28 degrees, 53 minutes, 23 seconds south, and 58 degrees, 46 minutes, 51 seconds west.
Wow, okay, very precise.
I mentioned the exact coordinates because I want you to understand that this isn't like a suburban neighborhood with paved sidewalks and streetlights and security cameras.
Right, it's a highly specific rural topography.
Exactly. In that part of Corrientes, the landscape is characterized by what they call montes and pasionales. So we are talking about dense, thorny thickets, wild brush, and tall, swampy grasses.
And visibility is terrible, right?
Oh, it drops to near zero if you walk even 10 feet off a dirt path. It is just unforgiving terrain.
Right. It's the kind of landscape that feels isolated, almost cut off from the rest of the world. And the prosecution's entire case is built on the people who are sitting around the table at this lunch.
The inner circle.
Yeah, the dossier makes it abundantly clear that this inner circle of adults is the cornerstone of everything that follows. We even have photographs documenting exactly who was there.
So let's look at the cast of characters.
Yeah, because the power dynamics at this table are just fascinating.
Right.
First, you have the family. You have Loan's biological father, Jose Peña. You have Loan's aunt, Lodelina Peña.
Right.
You have her husband, Bernardino Antonio Benitez, who is Loan's uncle. Then you have local family friends, Daniel Oscar Ramirez, who goes by the nickname Fiorito, and his partner, Monica del Carmen Miapi.
And, I mean, if the guest list stopped there, you would just have a standard rural family gathering.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But then we have two figures whose mere presence changes the entire socio-political dynamic of the room.
Yeah, this is where it gets complicated.
You have Maria Victoria Calva, who's an active municipal official in the town of 9 de Julio. She represents local political power. And her husband, Carlos Guido Perez, who is a retired naval captain from the Argentine Navy. He represents military background, logistical training, and federal connections.
So you have this incredibly volatile mix. Rural family members, local friends, and then this highly connected, powerful couple.
Right, so they have lunch. And then, according to the initial story, the one that was broadcast to the world, around 2:30 in the afternoon, a smaller subgroup decides to go for a walk.
Just a post-lunch stroll, supposedly?
Yeah, this group consists of Benitez, Ramirez, and Miapi. They take Loan, who is just 5 years old, remember, along with 5 other young children, to an orange grove, a naranjal, located about 600 meters from the house.
And their claim, their absolute bedrock narrative, is that on the way back to the house, they somehow just lost visual contact with Loan.
They just lost him.
Yeah, they assumed he just wandered off ahead of them into the brush.
Which was the narrative presented to the authorities on day one. A simple, tragic case of a young child getting separated from the pack in a difficult, disorienting terrain.
It's a story that preys on every parent's worst fear. And honestly, because of the dense montes we described, it sounds completely plausible to the general public.
It does. But, I have to push back on this.
Yeah.
Because when you really think about the mechanics of that moment, it feels like a classic locked room mystery.
How so?
Well, let's break it down. How does a 5-year-old child just vanish into thin air at 2:30 in the afternoon in broad daylight with 3 adults standing right there?
Right. It doesn't make sense.
No. Unless he sprinted silently into the thorny brush, which is physically painful and naturally deters a child, it defies basic logic. Children are noisy. The brush is noisy.
Yeah, exactly.
You don't just misplace a child in a group like that without someone seeing a flash of clothing, hearing a rustle of branches, or hearing a cry. It's mathematically and physically absurd.
What's fascinating here is how the federal justice system systematically dismantled that exact narrative using the very geography the suspects tried to hide behind.
Oh, I love this part.
Yeah, the prosecution absolutely does not believe this was a case of negligence. They introduced a vital legal and investigative concept called iter criminis.
Which translates to what exactly?
It translates to the path of the crime or the planned trajectory of a criminal act. Their theory, which is now backed by massive federal indictments, is that this walk to the orange grove was never a recreational stroll.
Wait, so it was planned?
It was a staged event. It was a calculated distraction designed specifically to remove Loan from the immediate protective custody of his father, who stayed back at the house.
Wow, so they needed to isolate the target, and they needed an excuse to get him away from the safety of the grandmother's patio.
Precisely. And when the investigators actually went out to the site and mathematically plotted the sightlines, the idea of an accidental, irreversible disappearance of a 5-year-old at that time of day became highly improbable.
Because of the layout?
Yes. The terrain is tough, but it's not a black hole. There are specific walking paths. There are barbed wire fences. If a child walks off the path, they hit dense, loud vegetation.
Right.
The justice system would later go to great lengths to physically prove that a child couldn't just slip away unnoticed under those specific measurable conditions. The environment was utilized not because it swallowed him up accidentally, but because it provided the perfect, believable cover story for a deliberate extraction.
They basically relied on the public's assumption that the woods are dangerous.
Exactly.
Which brings us to the immediate aftermath. Once the adults come back without the child, the alarm is raised.
Yeah.
And ironically, the dossier notes that the official missing persons report was actually filed by the municipal official, Maria Victoria Callava.
Which is wild in retrospect.
Right. So we are moving into the crucial window of June 14th through the 20th. Because once that report is filed, the provincial state apparatus kicks into absolute overdrive.
And we have to remember, the state is responding to the premise they were given. A lost child in the rural brush. They don't know it's a crime scene yet.
Yeah, they think it's a search and rescue mission.
Exactly.
And the scale of this response is mind-blowing. It really is. They activate the Alerta Sofia. And for our listeners who might not be familiar, the Alerta Sofia is Argentina's national emergency system for missing children. It's very similar to the Amber Alert system in the United States or the Alerta Isabel Claudina in other regions.
Yeah, it's a huge deal.
It's not just a poster on a bulletin board. When the Alerta Sofia is triggered, it is a massive, instantaneous dissemination of the child's face, description, and the coordinates of the disappearance.
It's everywhere all at once.
Literally. It hijacks cell phone networks. It pushes notifications through meta interfaces, so Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp. It overrides standard broadcasting on television and radio, and it alerts all federal border crossings.
It is designed to flood the zone with awareness instantly. Because in the world of missing persons, those first 72 hours are universally recognized as the golden window.
Right, the most important time.
Yeah, this is the critical period where the chances of recovering a victim alive before they are moved out of the region or succumb to the elements are statistically the highest. Every single minute is a diminishing probability of survival.
So the digital alert goes out, but on the ground, it's even more intense. It's a small army. You have the provincial police of Corrientes. You have the National Gendarmerie, which is a highly militarized federal force used for border security and major operations.
And the army.
Yeah, you have the Argentine army providing logistical support. We are talking about over 600 highly specialized officers converging on this tiny rural town.
Over 600. Just let that sink in.
And they are establishing search grids across an area of more than 12,000 hectares. They have 250 vehicles, mounted cavalry pushing through the tall grasses, sniffer dogs trained specifically in odorology, and squadrons of thermal-equipped drones mapping the area from the sky.
From a logistical standpoint, it is a textbook, overwhelming deployment. It is exactly what you want your government to do when a child goes missing. It is a multi-million-dollar mobilization of resources.
And for a few days, it looks like they are on the right track. They are finding things in the brush that seem to confirm the lost child theory.
Right, little clues.
Yeah, they find traces of small footprints in the mud. They find traces of vomiting, things that make the searchers think, okay, he's out here, he's scared, his stomach is upset, he's just trying to survive in the wild.
Which is so heartbreaking to think about.
It really is. And then on June 14th, right in the middle of this massive Alerta Sofia deployment, comes the turning point. A shoe.
The shoe.
A small mud-covered sneaker belonging to Loan is found in a swampy area of the thicket, about 2 kilometers from the house. But here is the gut punch that changes the entire trajectory of this case.
Yeah.
Forensic analysis, footprint trajectory, and later confessions proved that the shoe was deliberately planted there. Loan never walked to that swamp.
Yes. This is the exact moment the case violently shifts from a tragic search and rescue operation to a chilling, orchestrated conspiracy.
But wait, I really need to unpack this because it boggles the mind. It's like hiring an arsonist to be the fire chief. He isn't just letting the building burn. He's actively directing the water hoses to the empty lot next door so the evidence burns faster.
Yeah, that's a really good analogy.
You have 600 highly trained people looking for a needle in a haystack. You have drones watching the sky. You have federal agents combing the grass. How does someone intentionally walk into the middle of that highly scrutinized haystack and move the needle? How is that even possible with all those eyes watching?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we have to look at who is controlling the eyes. I mean, who draws the map? Who decides where the 600 people look?
Right.
This brings us to a terrifying, highly sophisticated concept in forensic science known as the criminalistics of obstruction.
Okay.
The person who guided the search teams to the exact muddy quadrant where that planted shoe was found wasn't just a random local relative slipping past police lines. It was the highest ranking police authority on the ground.
Wait, really?
Yes. The local police chief of 9 de Julio, Comisario Walter Adrian Maciel.
The chief of police, the guy literally standing on the hood of the patrol car, pointing at maps, telling the federal agents where to march.
Exactly. The investigation revealed that Comisario Maciel, allegedly in direct coordination with Loan's aunt Laudalina, who, by the way, later admitted to her part in this staging under extreme duress, deliberately altered the physical crime scene.
Unbelievable.
By planting that shoe, Maciel successfully contained hundreds of searchers within a false geographical quadrant. Think about the psychology of a search team. When you find a piece of evidence like a shoe, you don't expand the search, you collapse it.
Right, you zoom in.
You focus all your energy, your dogs, your drones, on that immediate radius, assuming the child is barefoot and close by. He kept the cavalry, the drones, and the dogs meticulously searching the wrong direction, effectively burning through that critical 72-hour golden window.
He kept them busy chasing a ghost. He used their own thoroughness against them.
He neutralized the entire national security response from the inside out. He used the very protocols designed to find the child to hide the child. But the dossier reveals it gets infinitely worse.
How could it be worse?
While the entire town of 9 de Julio was supposedly locked down, roadblocks up, trunks being searched, every car being checked, Comisario Maciel used his supreme local authority to grant a tactical authorization for Maria Victoria Callava and Carlos Guido Perez to leave the area.
Wait. The municipal official and the ex-Navy captain, the prime suspects?
Yes. He allowed them to bypass the cordons and travel to the city of Resistencia in the neighboring province of Chaco. He essentially created a free zone, a secure, unsearched corridor for the very people who are now accused of extracting the child from the province.
That is just, it's a profound, almost unfathomable betrayal of public trust because, as you said, the system worked. The alert of Sophia triggered perfectly. The federal army showed up on time. The dogs were ready. But it didn't matter one bit because the guy drawing the map was lying.
It proves a terrifying corollary about modern society. The most advanced logistical, digital, and military safety nets are rendered completely useless if the physical, human chain of command on the ground is corrupt. The system assumes good faith at the local command level. When that good faith is replaced by complicity, the system becomes a weapon for the perpetrators.
So if the human eyes on the ground are compromised, if the local police chief is actively sabotaging the grid, how do you ever find the truth?
You have to get creative.
Right. You have to bypass human testimony entirely. You have to rely on something that cannot be bribed, something that cannot be misdirected by a planted shoe. Molecular forensics.
Yes.
This takes us to the crucial pivot point. Between June 21st and 22nd, the justice system finally orders technical scientific tests on the vehicles of the people who were at that lunch.
And this is standard procedure in a missing persons case, to check the vehicles of the last people to see the victim. But because of the delay caused by Maciel's false search grids, it took days to get here.
Right. But science doesn't forget. They bring in the heavy forensic artillery. They use luminol reagents, which react with the iron and hemoglobin to detect invisible traces of blood. And they bring in highly trained odorology dogs.
Which is amazing science.
It is. Now, I want to take a second to explain odorology. It sounds like magic, but it's pure biology. We shed thousands of microscopic skin cells every minute. These cells carry a unique chemical signature, volatile organic compounds, that is as distinct as a fingerprint.
Right.
When a person sits in a closed environment like a car, they leave an invisible molecular cloud of themselves behind. The dogs are trained to match the scent from a known article, like Loan's unwashed clothing from his home, to the environment.
And when they test the vehicles of the lunch attendees, they get massive positive hits.
Yes. They find Loan's distinct odorological and organic markers, but they don't find them in a tractor. They don't find them in a farm truck used to haul oranges. They find his concentrated scent inside a red Ford Ka.
Wow.
And this red Ford Ka belongs to the municipal official Cayava and her ex-Navy husband, Perez.
This is the forensic smoking gun that entirely collapses the lost child narrative. You see, the red Ford Ka was never at the rural orange grove. It was parked back at the grandmother's house, and then it was driven away. It was never in the difficult terrain where Loan supposedly wandered off. If his organic scent is heavily concentrated inside that specific car, he did not wander away. He was physically placed inside that car.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because the entire profile of the suspects immediately shifts. We are no longer looking at rural relatives who maybe looked away for 5 minutes and made a tragic mistake. We are looking at highly connected officials with military backgrounds.
Exactly.
And the subsequent raids, based on that car evidence, reveal just how deeply connected and prepared they are. Based on the red Ford Ka hits, the justice system orders raids on Perez's properties in Resistencia, Chaco. Let me remind you, this is the exact neighboring province that Police Chief Maciel gave him a free pass to travel to during the lockdown.
Right, it all connects.
They raid properties on Nicochea Street and Passage Humeta. And what they find inside is not the luggage of people going on a weekend trip. What they find is an arsenal.
We are talking about military-grade logistics and highly sophisticated operational gear.
Yeah, the dossier meticulously lists the exact inventory recovered by federal agents. A 9mm Browning pistol, 65 intact 9mm cartridges, 72 spent casings of the same caliber, 190 cartridges of 7.65 caliber with their corresponding magazines, massive sums of high denomination cash.
And the tech.
Right. And highly unusual surveillance equipment, including multiple DVRs ripped from building camera systems and various wiped computer devices.
When you find that level of firepower, that amount of untraceable cash and countermeasures like wiped surveillance tech, and it is all directly associated with people who have the undeniable organic scent of a missing child in a vehicle that was never at the supposed scene of disappearance, the paradigm shifts completely.
Yeah, you aren't looking at an accident anymore.
No, you are no longer investigating an accident or even a simple kidnapping for ransom. You are investigating organized crime. You are looking at a highly coordinated extraction possessing the logistics typical of human trafficking and a legal VIP adoption ring or worse.
And the provincial justice system in Corrientes realizes they're completely out of their depth, right? They look at the guns, the cash, the corrupt police chief, and they just hit the panic button.
They have no choice. On June 24th, 2024, the provincial justice system formally declares itself incompetent to handle the material facts of the case.
What does that mean legally?
In Argentine law, when a local judge declares incompetence in a case like this, they are stating legally that the crime transcends provincial boundaries and capabilities. The magnitude of what they uncovered demanded a systemic shift to the federal level.
Okay, so the feds take over.
Yes. The case was immediately absorbed by the federal justice system. Specifically, the investigation was handed over to Protex.
Let's explain Protex, because they are the heavy hitters. Protex stands for the Procuraduría de Trata y Explotación de Personas. They are the specialized federal agency dedicated exclusively to combating human trafficking and exploitation networks.
Yes, and crucially, when the federal judge, Dr. Cristina Pozzer-Penzo, takes over, the first thing they do is amputate the local corruption.
They cut them out.
Totally. They remove the Corrientes provincial police from the investigation entirely. Not a single local cop is allowed near the evidence. They replace them exclusively with the Argentine federal police and the National Gendarmerie.
They basically said, look, we can't trust the local cops. They're actively working against us, and we are dealing with a federal-level organized crime syndicate.
Exactly.
But of course, the local political power structures weren't just going to quietly hand over the keys, step back, and accept that a massive federal child trafficking scandal was happening in their backyard under their watch.
No, they fought back.
Right. And this leads us right into the most chaotic and infuriating phase of the dossier. We are moving into late June and July of 2024.
This is where the waters get incredibly murky and where we see the desperate, almost sociopathic lengths institutions will go to in order to protect their political image and avoid federal scrutiny.
So the feds are closing in. Callava and Perez are detained based on the forensic evidence. Police Chief Maciel is under the microscope. And then, out of nowhere, Loan's aunt, Laudalina, the one who was at the Orange Grove, suddenly surfaces to give a brand new statement.
But not to the feds.
No. She doesn't go to the federal judge who is now legally running the case. She bypasses federal jurisdiction entirely and goes to a provincial prosecutor in the middle of the night on June 29th. And she introduces a brand new, wild, out-of-left-field narrative.
It's crazy.
She claims there was no kidnapping, there is no trafficking ring. Forget the arsenal. She says Loan was accidentally run over and killed by Callava and Perez in a different vehicle, their white Ford Ranger pickup truck.
She claims she was a terrified witness to vehicular manslaughter.
Right. And she spins this elaborate tale.
Yeah.
She says that Callava, Perez, and Police Chief Maciel cornered her after the accident. She claims they threatened to kill her and her family if she didn't help them cover it up. She says they forced her to bury the child's body in the woods, and then they handed her that single shoe and forced her to go plant it in the mud to make it look like he ran away.
Which is a whole lot to unpack.
Seriously. Now, before we even get into how quickly this falls apart under basic forensic scrutiny, we have to talk about the political explosion this caused. Because almost simultaneously with her giving this bizarre, uncorroborated provincial statement, the governor of Corrientes, Gustavo Valdez, takes to his official X account, formerly Twitter.
Oh, the tweet.
Yes, the tweet. And he tweets to his hundreds of thousands of followers, and I quote, "A huge step has been taken in the resolution of the Loan case."
Now, we need to be really careful here. Looking objectively at the timeline in the dossier, we see a massive political collision. And to be clear, we are just impartially reporting what the sources say here. We aren't taking any political sides at all.
Right. Definitely not taking sides.
But the objective impact of a sitting governor validating an uncorroborated provincial level confession in the middle of an active federal human trafficking case is staggering.
He basically celebrated the idea that it was just a terrible traffic accident and a messy cover-up.
Exactly.
Man.
Because you have to look at the incentives. From a political and institutional standpoint, an involuntary manslaughter case, even one with a gruesome cover-up by a rogue police chief, is a localized tragedy. It is a contained scandal. It is manageable.
Right. He doesn't bring the whole house down.
But a federal investigation into a sophisticated, organized human trafficking ring operating with the logistical support of your local police chief, your municipal officials, and your borders. That is a systemic crisis that threatens to topple the entire political administration of the province.
Wow.
There was an immense, undeniable political incentive for the local power structures to downgrade this crime from federal trafficking to local manslaughter. The governor's tweet effectively told the public, hey, it's over, it's sad, but it wasn't trafficking, go back to your lives.
But the lie was fundamentally flawed, and it didn't hold. The lawyers representing Loan's parents, including high-profile attorneys Fernando Burlando, Juan Pablo Gallego, and Roberto Hugo Mendez, immediately called it out as a crude, desperate defensive maneuver.
They saw right through it.
They pointed out that the federal forensics showed no signs of a fatal impact on the Ford Ranger. But the real unraveling didn't come from the lawyers. It came from inside Laudalina's own family.
The truth often breaks through the most unexpected fissures, usually from the people who can no longer bear the psychological weight of the lie.
In early July, Laudalina's daughter, Macarena, and another key witness named Camila Nunez realized the sheer danger of what is happening. They bypass the local corrupt authorities entirely. They go straight to the federal judge, Dr. Cristina Pazarpenzo, and they blow the whistle hard.
Good for them.
They testify for over 3 hours, breaking down in tears, revealing that Laudalina's entire accident story was a meticulously fabricated lie. Macarena reveals that her mother was coerced, threatened, and heavily bribed by her own defense attorney at the time, a man named Jose Codazzi.
The specifics of the bribe and the coercion detailed in their federal testimony are chillingly transactional. It shows exactly how vulnerable people are manipulated by power.
The dossier outlines it clearly. Macarena testified that attorney Codazzi offered her mother a house, a new motorcycle, and large sums of cash to go to the provincial prosecutor and plant this lie about the Ford Ranger accident.
That was the carrot.
Exactly. And the stick. The threat was terrifying. She was told that if she didn't install this accident alibi to protect the political structures, she would turn up suicided in the Aziza prison.
My God.
For context, Aziza is a maximum security federal complex. Threatening to have someone murdered and staged as a suicide inside a federal prison is mafia-level coercion.
And it exposes the extreme vulnerability of rural, peripheral actors in these grand criminal schemes. Laudalina, a rural woman with limited resources, was squeezed in a vice.
Yes, she was trapped in.
On one side, she faced the threat of a federal human trafficking charge because of her involvement at the Orange Grove. On the other side, she faced the terrifying immediate pressure of corrupt local power brokers trying to silence the scandal with bribes and death threats.
Wow.
When Macarena exposed the bribe, the entire accident maneuver collapsed instantly. Laudalina was formally indicted by the federal prosecutors, not for manslaughter, but for the original federal charges: child abduction, concealment, and altering judicial evidence.
And what happened to the governor after his celebratory tweet blew up in his face?
Well, Governor Valdez faced massive, intense public backlash for his interference. He was accused of trying to orchestrate impunity. He later tried to walk it back in press conferences, claiming his tweet was just the result of anxiety as a father who was getting informed by watching TV like everyone else.
Okay.
But the institutional damage was absolute and irreversible. It cemented the public's perception that the provincial state was not just incompetent, but actively, maliciously trying to sabotage the search for the truth to save its own skin.
Which creates a massive, dangerous vacuum of trust. If you are a citizen watching this unfold, and you can't trust the local police chiefs because he's planting evidence in swamps, and you can't trust the local politicians because they're tweeting out false, coerced confessions, who do you trust? Where do you turn?
It's a scary place to be.
It is. And this brings us to a really bizarre, almost surreal, and deeply terrifying part of the dossier. Nature abhors a vacuum, right? And into this massive vacuum of institutional trust steps a group calling itself the Fondation Dupuy.
This is undoubtedly one of the most sociologically alarming aspects of the entire case file. It represents a completely different vector of vulnerability.
I want you to imagine a true crime podcast coming to life, but in the absolute worst, most predatory way possible. It's like a virus hijacking a weakened immune system.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is.
This group arrives in the small town of 9 de Julio in August of 2024. They present themselves as a highly credentialed international squad of legal advisors, child psychologists, and elite investigators. They are wearing official-looking lanyards.
Looking the part.
Their point man is a guy named Nicholas Gabriel Soria, who swaggers into town going by the alias El Yankee, or the American, and he is literally walking around town flashing fake Interpol credentials, claiming to have direct ties to United States intelligence agencies, and demanding access to witnesses.
This raises a vital, urgent question about the modern media landscape. How does an unaccredited fraudulent group gain such immense physical and psychological control over an active federal human trafficking crime scene?
It's wild.
We are talking about a phenomenon the federal dossier explicitly identifies as civil lawfare.
Let's define that because it's fascinating. Civil lawfare in this context is when private actors use the trappings of the law, fake legal threats, pseudo-psychological jargon, and media manipulation to obstruct justice for their own gain.
Right.
This fake NGO rolls into town and literally takes over a local hotel called the Despertar del Ibera. They rent out the rooms and turn it into a logistical base of operations. And using their fake credentials and the sheer confusion of the town, they managed to isolate and practically hold hostage the most valuable, vulnerable witnesses in the entire federal case.
Witnesses.
Yeah. They get physical control of Camila Nunez. They get Macarena Peña, the very whistleblower who just exposed the bribe. And crucially, most horrifically, they take custody of all the young children who were at the Orange Grove the day Loan disappeared.
They operated under the guise of providing ad honorem psychological support and legal counsel to a traumatized community. But the federal prosecution, after raiding the hotel, determined that this was a highly coordinated scheme of evidentiary intoxication.
What exactly were they doing to these kids inside that hotel?
They were subjecting these vulnerable witnesses, especially the young children whose memories are incredibly malleable, to intense psychological sieges. They were conducting unauthorized, unrecorded interviews. They were coaching them, rehearsing testimonies, and actively manipulating their memories of what happened at the Orange Grove. And they were doing this right before these children were scheduled to give formal, legally binding interviews to the federal authorities in the Gazelle Chamber.
We need to explain the Gazelle Chamber because it shows exactly why what this fake NGO did was so destructive to the case.
Yeah, it's so important.
The Gazelle Chamber is a specialized room used by the justice system to interview minors. It has a one-way mirror. The child sits in a comfortable room with a highly trained, neutral forensic psychologist who asks non-leading questions.
Right, very careful questioning.
The judges, prosecutors, and defense attorneys sit in the dark room behind the mirror, listening and communicating with the psychologist via an earpiece. The entire purpose is to get a pure, unpolluted, untraumatized account from the child.
Which is incredibly hard to do, even under perfect conditions.
Exactly. So by intercepting these kids at the hotel and drilling false narratives into their heads for weeks, the Fondation Dupuy effectively poisoned the most crucial well of evidence the feds had.
The audacity is truly staggering. They weren't just observing, they were rewriting the evidentiary record. And the dossier notes that when the federal justice system finally realized what was happening, when they realized a rogue group of podcasters and fake spies were holding their witnesses hostage, they sent the Argentine Naval Prefecture to raid the hotel and extract the witnesses.
And what did this guy, Soria El Yankee, do?
He literally tried to physically barricade the hotel. He was nailing wooden planks over the doors and windows to block heavily armed federal agents from getting inside. It escalated into a literal cult compound standoff scenario.
It's insane. It demonstrates a terrifying systemic vulnerability in how we handle high-profile media cases. These cases generate immense public clamor, a massive thirst for content, and parasitic organizations can hijack that emotion.
Yeah, they feed on it.
They feed off the chaos and the spotlight. The federal prosecutor in charge of this branch of the investigation, Tamara Porcel, stated plainly that this hotel was an operational base built for one purpose: to isolate, influence, and manipulate. It drained vital energy, manpower, and resources away from the primary investigation of actually finding the missing child.
Think about that.
The feds had to stop looking for Loan for a week just to dismantle this fake NGO.
But the justice system did catch up to them, and the consequences were severe. 10 members of this fake NGO, including Soria, the fake lawyers, and the fake child psychologists, were formally indicted.
Wow.
They are now facing their own massive trial for illegal deprivation of liberty, aggravated false testimony, fraud against public administration, and usurpation of titles. They literally created a second devastating layer of obstruction stacked right on top of the initial police corruption.
It's a sobering reminder that interference doesn't always come from the perpetrators trying to hide. Sometimes it comes from opportunists seeking power, relevance, or profit in the chaotic wake of a tragedy. So let's look at the board. We have the initial staging at the Orange Grove. We have the local police actively sabotaging the grid search. We have the political structures attempting to write the whole thing off as a car crash to save face. And we have a fake NGO holding child witnesses hostage in a barricaded hotel.
It is pure, unadulterated, institutional chaos.
But as we move into the end of 2024 and early 2025, we see the federal justice system finally cutting through that chaos with cold, hard, undeniable legal logic. This brings us to the dogmatic configuration of the case. We are looking at the period from December 2024 to April 2025.
This is where the legal architecture of the impending trial is finalized. The Federal Chamber of Appeals of Corrientes hands down rulings that don't just affect this case, but set profound precedents in Argentine penal dogmatics and human rights law.
The federal judge, Dr. Cristina Pasarpenso, and later the Chamber of Appeals, review the mountains of evidence. The luminol, the wiped DVRs, the planted shoe, and they confirm the indictments. They categorize the 6 civilians who were at the lunch, Perez, Cayava, Laudlina, Benitez, Ramirez, and Malapi, as material co-authors of the crime of abduction, retention, and concealment of a minor under 10 years of age.
Material co-authors.
Yes. By calling them co-authors, the court essentially said their actions were so deeply interwoven, so perfectly synchronized, that you cannot separate the guilt of the person who physically grabbed the child from the guilt of the person who provided the getaway car.
And then there is the legal categorization of Comisario Maciel, the police chief.
Right. Where does he fit in?
He wasn't charged as a material author of the kidnapping itself. The feds don't believe he was at the Orange Grove. However, the court confirmed his indictment as a necessary participant.
Necessary participant.
This is a crucial, fascinating legal distinction. It means that while he didn't snatch the child without his specific authoritative contributions, altering the search grids, planting the shoe in the mud, and authorizing the free transit of the prime suspects out of the province, the civilian co-authors would not have succeeded in hiding the child.
He enabled it.
His police badge was the essential tool that made the crime possible.
The court also hit them where it hurts financially, ratifying massive monetary embargoes on all of their assets. We are talking about embargoes ranging up to 20 million Argentine pesos per defendant, seizing bank accounts, properties, and vehicles to ensure potential reparations for the victim's family.
It's a huge financial hit.
But here is the legal argument from the defense that I find absolutely fascinating, and the court's response is a masterclass in legal theory. The defense lawyers for these accused individuals, particularly the high-priced lawyers for the ex-Navy captain, tried to get the entire case thrown out on a technicality.
Oh, of course they did.
Their argument was basically you can't prove why they took him. They argued that because the federal prosecutors couldn't definitively say if Loan was taken for labor trafficking or for an illegal VIP adoption ring or for some ritualistic purpose, the charges of abduction should be dropped. They demanded a motive.
That is a classic high-level defense strategy. Demand that the prosecution prove a specific motive to prove the crime, knowing that without a confession, a specific motive is almost impossible to prove beyond a reasonable doubt.
Right.
But the federal chamber introduced an unavoidable jurisprudential response. They ruled that under Article 146 of the Argentine Penal Code, the ultimate motive of the captors is legally irrelevant.
The motive just doesn't matter.
Exactly. Let's use an analogy. If someone steals a famous painting from a museum, the prosecution doesn't have to prove if the thief wanted to sell it on the black market, hang it in their living room, or burn it.
They just have to prove they stole it.
The same logic applies here, but with infinitely higher stakes. The prosecution does not need to prove why Loan was taken to secure a conviction for his abduction. The empirical forensic fact that a 5-year-old child was unlawfully removed from the custody of his parents, retained against their will, and hidden from the state is sufficient. The crime is the act of stealing the child, period.
Wow. And the federal anti-trafficking agency, Protex, added another layer to this legal architecture that just gives me chills every time I read it. They argued before the court that this is a crime of permanent execution.
Yes. This is a vital, non-negotiable concept in international human rights law, often applied in cases of forced disappearances. Let's break down what it means. Most crimes are closed events.
Right.
A robbery happens at 8:00 p.m. By 8:05 p.m., the crime is over and the investigation begins. The statute of limitations starts ticking. But the crime of abduction is different. It did not begin and end at 2:30 p.m. on June 13th, 2024, in that orange grove.
Because he's still missing.
Because the child has not been returned to his parents, the crime is still happening. It is continuously executing right this very second while we are speaking.
It's an ongoing action.
Exactly. It demands that the legal investigation remains at maximum intensity regardless of the passage of time. The defense cannot argue that the trail has gone cold. And tragically, it demands continuous investigation regardless of whether there is proof of life. The absence of a body does not absolve the kidnappers of murder or allow them to walk free. It merely proves the crime of concealment is ongoing and successful.
Which brings us to the precipice of where we are today and why the date I mentioned at the top of the show is so important. All of these chaotic threads, the initial staging, the planted shoe, the wiped DVRs, the fake NGO, they are about to violently collide in a single, highly secured courtroom.
It's going to be historic.
Next Tuesday, June 16th, 2026, the Oral Federal Tribunal in Corrientes will officially begin the trial. It is a mega trial in every sense of the word. They have combined the main kidnapping and trafficking case with the secondary case of the fake NGO into one massive proceeding.
Right.
So you have 17 defendants sitting in the dock together, and the judges have approved an astonishing 161 witnesses to testify.
The logistical and security magnitude of this trial is unprecedented for the northeast region of Argentina. They are preparing for massive media presence, potential protests, and immense security risks given the organized crime elements involved.
But behind the logistics, behind the mountains of legal paperwork and the media circus, is the agonizing, unimaginable human toll. It has been 2 years.
2 long years.
2 years of preventive prison for the accused, yes, but 2 years of absolute torturous waking nightmare for Loan's parents, Marina Guerra and Jose Peña. They've endured 2 years of birthdays, holidays, and passing days without knowing where their son is or who has him.
And the justice system is preparing meticulously to ensure this trial delivers answers. They are not leaving anything to chance or interpretation. Just a few weeks ago, on May 19th, 2026, the tribunal conducted an extraordinary legal procedure known as an in situ ocular inspection.
Oh, I read about this.
They essentially took the massive, cumbersome machinery of the federal court and dragged it back to the dirt. They went back to the zero scene in Algarabal.
They literally organized a heavily guarded field trip for the judges, the federal police peritos, the forensic experts, and 13 key people, crucially including the accused.
Yes, back to the scene.
They forced the people who claimed they just lost him to stand back at grandmother Catalina's house and back in the Orange Grove. The federal prosecutor made it explicitly clear beforehand they weren't there to interrogate the suspects. They weren't there to ask questions.
What were they doing then?
They were there to physically, mathematically reconstruct reality. They were there to measure the exact angles of the sight lines through the trees, to use stopwatches to time the walking paths from the house to the grove, to physically examine the height and density of the barbed wire fences.
Getting highly technical.
They wanted the trial judges to see with their own eyes, to feel the thorns of the brush, so they could understand that the story of a child just wandering off silently in that specific measurable space was a physical, geographic impossibility.
It's a powerful psychological and legal tactic. It's about grounding the abstract, sanitized theories of the courtroom in the dirt, the heat, and the reality of the geography. But despite all this pressure, despite the overwhelming forensic evidence of the red car, the federal indictments, the 20 million peso embargoes, and the physical reconstructions, the investigation is hitting a wall.
What wall?
A wall constructed by what the Argentine legal community calls the Pacto de Silencio, the Pact of Silence.
17 defendants, 2 full years locked in harsh preventive federal detention, facing the reality of spending the rest of their lives behind bars, and not a single one has broken.
It is an impenetrable, chilling cohesion. From the masterminds with military backgrounds to the rural relatives who acted as the initial captors, no one has utilized the ley del arrepentido, the whistleblower laws.
No one has talked?
No one has traded information for leniency to reveal the single most important detail of the entire case: who received the child, who was the ultimate buyer, and what was the final destination. The extraction was successful, but the delivery point remains hidden behind this wall of silence.
So the strategy of this mega trial isn't just about methodically presenting evidence to a judge. It's about psychological warfare. The federal prosecutors are hoping that sitting in that sterile courtroom, looking at the judges, facing the absolute undeniable reality of 15-year minimum sentences in maximum security federal prisons, will finally generate enough internal pressure to shatter that pact of silence.
Someone has to break.
The alliance is strong now, but when the gavel falls, someone has to realize that loyalty isn't worth dying in prison for. Someone has to break. So what does this all mean? If you are listening to this right now and you live thousands of miles away from Corrientes, Argentina, if you have no connection to this case, why should this deep dive matter to you? Why should you care?
That's a great question.
It matters because the disappearance of Loan Danilo Peña is a terrifying, globally relevant masterclass in how localized human corruption can completely neutralize the most advanced, well-funded national security protocols on Earth.
It forces us to confront the profound fragility of our systems. We build these massive, complex architectures of safety, comprehensive laws, elite federal agencies, multi-million-dollar technologies, but they all, without exception, ultimately rely on the integrity of the individuals operating them at the ground level.
Right, the human element.
When a local police chief decides to plant a shoe to protect a political ally, the entire multi-million-dollar apparatus of the state doesn't just fail, it becomes a powerful tool for the criminals.
It's an autopsy of state failure, just like we said at the beginning of the show. And while the federal legal machinery is finally, slowly, relentlessly grinding toward justice with this upcoming trial, we cannot lose sight of the core tragedy. The ultimate goal, the only goal that truly matters in all of this, remains unfulfilled. A 7-year-old boy named Loan Danilo Peña is still out there, and he is still missing.
And as we close today, I want to leave you with a thought that builds on everything we've discussed, specifically regarding our modern, almost religious reliance on technology. We take immense comfort in our digital safety nets. We assume that because we have global Alerta Sophia alerts pinging every smartphone in a country, because we have thermal drones that can see heat signatures through trees and GPS tracking on our devices, it is fundamentally impossible for a human being to simply vanish in the modern world.
Yeah, we feel safe.
We believe technology has eradicated the shadows, but the Loan case proves a terrifying, undeniable corollary. Digital safety nets are entirely useless if the physical human chain of command on the ground decides to lie.
Oh.
The technology amplifies the search, yes. It brings 600 people in helicopters to a field in a matter of hours. But if the person holding the map is corrupt, the technology also perfectly efficiently amplifies the deception. The tools of our salvation can instantly become the instruments of our obstruction.
It is a haunting reality that proves technology is only as good as the humanity wielding it. To you, the learner, thank you for joining us on this incredibly heavy, complex, and vital deep dive. We appreciate you taking the time to truly understand the intricate mechanisms behind the headlines. Stay curious, stay vigilant, and we'll see you next time.